The story of the United States begins with extraordinary risk. Over 4 centuries ago, small bands of adventurers and visionaries braved a perilous 2-month journey across the Atlantic Ocean, seeking opportunity, wealth, and freedom in an untamed wilderness. But the reality of this new world was often a living nightmare. In 1610, the English settlement of Jamestown, Virginia, was on the brink of collapse. It was the starving time. Of the more than 500 colonists who had arrived, barely 60 remained alive. Surrounded by the powerful Powhatan nation, the settlers were unprepared, desperate, and starving. But a young entrepreneur named John Rolfe arrived with a bold plan. He brought smuggled South American tobacco seeds, a crime punishable by death under Spanish law. Rolfe planted the seeds in the fertile Virginia soil, and the crop flourished. Almost overnight, tobacco became the continent's most lucrative export, transforming Jamestown from a death trap into a booming success. Rolfe's marriage to Pocahontas, the daughter of the Powhatan chief, brought a brief period of peace and made the colony famous across the ocean. A decade later, a different group of settlers arrived further north. In 1620, the Mayflower landed at Plymouth, Massachusetts, carrying religious dissidents seeking a sanctuary where they could worship freely. Unlike the fortune seekers in Virginia, the Pilgrims brought families, livestock, and a deep religious conviction. Yet, they too faced a brutal winter that claimed half their numbers. They were saved by an unlikely alliance with the local Wampanoag people, who taught them how to cultivate corn and survive the harsh environment. Together, they forged a fragile peace, celebrated in the first Thanksgiving. Over the next century, these fragile footholds grew into a thriving network of 13 colonies. Millions crossed the Atlantic, immigrants, indentured servants, and tragically, hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans who were forced to build the foundations of a new agricultural empire in the South. The colonies grew prosperous, healthy, and increasingly independent. They built a third of British shipping and became an economic powerhouse. But the British Crown, sitting 3,000 miles away, wanted a larger cut. By the 1760s, a series of heavy taxes sparked bitter resentment. In Boston, a city built on commerce, the tension boiled over. The British occupied the city with thousands of redcoats, leading to frequent clashes with the locals. The turning point came on March 5, 1770, when an angry mob confronted a small squad of British soldiers. In the chaos, the soldiers fired into the crowd, killing 5 colonists, including an African-American man named Crispus Attucks. Silversmith Paul Revere immortalized the event as the Boston Massacre, fueling outrage across the colonies. When the British attempted to strangle Boston's economy by closing its harbor, they inadvertently united the 13 colonies. In 1774, delegates met at the First Continental Congress, pledging to defend one another. Across New England, local militias, composed of farmers, blacksmiths, and ordinary citizens, began stockpiling weapons. The inevitable clash arrived on the morning of April 19, 1775. 900 British redcoats marched to Lexington and Concord to seize rebel weapons. Warned by Paul Revere's legendary midnight ride, a small band of colonial militia stood their ground on the Lexington Green. Someone fired, the shot heard round the world. The British forces overwhelmed the militia, but as they marched back to Boston, thousands of enraged colonists shadowed their retreat, firing from behind trees and stone walls. It was the dawn of a new era. The descendants of the first desperate settlers were no longer just British subjects, they were Americans. And they were now at war with the greatest military superpower on earth, fighting to turn their dream of liberty into a reality.